All right, good morning, everyone. Excited to be here in our Workforce Rewired podcast. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Keva Walton. Keva is the CEO of Mecklenburg ABC Board and also a member of the Catapult Board. And we're excited to have a conversation with Keva this morning really around a topic that I think is near and dear to everyone's hearts over the last 5 years, if not longer. And that's around change fatigue. We know that changes around us, I think COVID accelerated that and required all of us to think differently about how we were working, how we were socializing, how we were moving through the world. And it seems, Kiva, like that pace of change has continued 5 years post-COVID. Now we have the onslaught of artificial intelligence, and that's accelerating the pace of change. And I heard a great quote from a conference I went to recently, and it was, "The pace of change will never be as slow as it is today."
Mm,
And if you just
wow.
sit with that for a minute and you think about the pace of change will never be as slow
It's
as it is today. Like
frightening.
that's a reality shock, I
Yeah,
think, for all of
yeah,
us.
yeah,
And
yeah.
makes us think about how are we working with our employees and how are we getting them on board with all the change initiatives. And so, I think I'd like to just start off by saying thank you for joining me in this conversation. And I'd love to hear kind of your reaction to that quote of the pace of change.
Wow. Well, Cheryl, it is a pleasure to be here. Always a joy to join you in these kind of conversations. And first, I also want to say I am so excited about joining the Catapult board. You all do such great work, and my organization has benefited greatly from that. And so, thank you, and your team. Um, I tell this story. I always say, you're old when you got a lot of stories that fit everything, right? So I remember I moved to Charlotte in '86, and I'm driving down Central Avenue, and I hear Cal Cardus, and I think you remember Cal, um, advertising a facsimile machine. And I thought, wow, I remember exactly where I was on Central Avenue thinking, that is crazy. I'm just, wow. And here we are, artificial intelligence. So I know it's true. I know that quote is true. That was 1986. And here we are in 2026. So it only accelerates. And the only folks challenged by those are the folks that are challenged by those changes. And I get it. I'm one of them sometimes, sometimes not, it depends. So it's true. Um, at the same time, it's frightening in one sense as well. What kind of world will this be? You watch some of the futuristic things, iRobot and all of those kind of things, and say, are we living in the matrix maybe?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know, it's interesting for me. I talk with a lot of CEOs in our member organizations, and there's this real tension between needing to evolve, right? Needing to change. And there's plenty of books written, change or die,
Yeah.
evolve or get left behind. But I think there's a real tension for leaders of organizations who are trying to implement change and then bringing other people along with that, perhaps who, are either resistant to change or they're not sure what the change is. So what kind of advice do you give people about continuing the pace of change that you need to for your organization, and bringing people along without kind of stalling the progress?
Cheryl, and let me first disclaimer. I do not have the answer, but by George, I'm seeking it. So I welcome any insight. You know, I I joined MEC ABC at the height of the pandemic. I mean, we were smack dab in the middle, and so I walked in with change. And I think at some point, as people in these seats, we've got to look at our own change capacity. Where are we on the spectrum? And I tend to be on the higher end, not just for change sakes, but for change for progress sake. So it's and right now as we speak, we're in the middle of yet another one. Everyone came through pandemic, and within our organization, I'm calling it the economic triad because there are forces that are completely disrupting the spirituous liquor industry. And so, okay, we came through pandemic, life got better, soar. And now there's the post normalize. Now there's another curveball, so to speak. So it's a constant, ever changing thing. And trying to seek balance, but between all of that. I do think for folks in our role, though, we are charged with trying to not sit and wait. There is no crystal ball. We've got data, we've got our intuition, we've got great conversations and organizations like Catapult. And it's up to us in these seats to navigate a course and then try to bring folks along. And that is the most complex thing of all.
Yeah. I think about you and your organization a lot when I think about needing to pivot
Yep.
to capture a new market or new demographic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back to your story as of, 1986 and the fax machine. And I'm also reminded that back then the society was different and we were all concerned about drinking and driving, right? And you had moms
Mm-hmm.
against drunk driving and dads against drunk driving and, all the ads that went up around that. And, I've got young children, adult children now, and alcohol's just a very different thing for them, right? They don't even think about
Mm-hmm.
it the way we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
But that also puts a pressure on your business. I can imagine if we looked at your graphs of spike in purchases coming out of into COVID, and then now you've got, new Gen Zers that are coming in and they don't have the same buying habits that previous generations did. They're looking at alternative, sources. So how do you stay abreast of changing markets and demographics to keep your business alive? And then, how do you communicate where you're going with
Yeah.
those demographic
Yeah.
shifts?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head, and one of the three legs of our economic triad is shifts in demographics. Whether it's I'm more concerned about my health and I don't want to binge drink or drink, or I can't afford it. I have to drink cheaper. So it's either or. And so, we're constantly, we have the 17 control states. There's a national organization called NABCA, a National Association of Beverage Control Organizations. And they do a lot of big picture things and gather data there, but we're relying much more closely on our own data analytics. We've made a lot of investment in our computing platform and our ability to capture and track and report and look at trends. The interesting thing about a place like Mecklenburg is you've got a million plus people and a wide range of people. So you can't just say, oh, well, let's zero in here. And we have 31 stores. That demographic may be very different from the one that's closest to uptown. So, data analysts, I'm a big, I wish I could say I was a technologist, but I'm not. I just love the results of data because it paints a picture and it's often very interesting. And you have to take that in. Now, how do you take that and translate it so that your workforce understands it and sees it? Because sometimes, hey, my store is doing great, and but over here we got to balance the thing. So data, constant. There's a lot out in the journals now. Fortune, everybody's talking about the industry and changing in attitudes.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I love that you brought up the fact of using data to drive the change. How much, let me take that and blend it into then how do you communicate that to your employees?
Yeah,
How much data do you give them? How transparent are you in releasing some of those insights to then allow them to embrace the change imperative so that
yeah,
then you can move closer towards, that desired future state?
yeah. Well, it's an ongoing, and Cheryl, this is so timely because I'm telling you, we're smack dab in the middle of yet another curve. And, the first thing, I always go back to who moved my cheese. The piece is timeless. I mean, it is so relevant. Ironically, I started out with holding sessions around that topic. I renamed it "Who Moved My Bottle," you know, and had people come in the whole part time, full time, and we did maybe 15 sessions like that around who moved my bottle and what was coming. Well, now we're back again, and I just shared a communication with the full staff just a couple of weeks ago reintroducing Who Moved My Cheese again because here we are. And I think one of the things that's powerful about our data platform, particularly with our store leaders, is giving them the power to look at their sales trends on their cell phones. Okay, these sales were up. These sales, this product is not moving. How do we, and that in itself is a change curve because we went on our gut and nothing wrong with your gut. Your gut is probably good, but let's trust and verify with the data. And then, constant, we've got an upcoming all employee meeting. We'll talk more about this and having to communicate on multiple levels because, everybody receives it differently. And you can't just say it once, it's got to be repeated over and over again. And people come at it. If you've been with the organization a while, you're going to approach it with maybe a little more skepticism than if you're new. And that's fair. And so it's a constant repetition, consistency, and alignment with why. That through all of this, you get the big why and what's your why, and let's make sure we're on target with that and consistent with our mission, our vision, and our values.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think, that's really the crux of if people don't understand why their
Yeah,
change is happening and they can't see how that's tied to the mission and the
yeah,
evolution of an organization and frankly the sustainability in some cases of
yeah.
not just an organization but an industry like yours,
Mhm.
there's a real disconnect
Yeah,
there. So do you have any tips or tricks for some of the communication strategies that you've
yeah.
used that, helps communicate it to employees that it's not overwhelming
Yeah.
and, stays, I love your example, who moved my bottle. That's
Well, yeah, and again, it is continuous learning. I mean, what worked then may not work now. Some of it may, and so you beg, borrow, steal from all. But with us, we've got maybe 60% of our workforce thereabout is part time, and so that adds another wrinkle. And so we're making sure we use snail mail, we use internal postings on our local internal networks. And so we have a newsletter. So constant repetitiveness over in multiple ways. We will leverage our all employee meeting coming up this month to do more of this. And then try to do it in an engaging way. We've also done someone was joking with one of my team. I believe our CFO said, "Well, you're showing your age. I started these things called fireside chats." And he said, "I believe that was FDR." I said, "Well, it was good then. It'll be good now." So, so, but I mean, so we have these fireside chats where people can sign up. It's not mandatory. We'll host them in store, have a little breakfast, and just talk about things. But one of the things I was thinking about this, not communicating is not an option. It's just not. I mean, I think about the memo I sent recently. It was some hard stuff in there,
Mhm.
but I feel it my responsibility to the role that I'm in and to them to be as transparent and honest as I can. And and I also have learned, am learning that sometimes it's situational. I mean, you have to kind of read the environment, and sometimes some things is a slow drip, and sometimes it's a fast push. Um, so there is no one thing, but often, frequently, and comprehensively would be my thing.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad you said that. I am taken back to marketing days, and I think of, marketing message. You have to hit it 7 times in 7 different ways for
Right, right,
before the
right.
message gets heard. And our change initiatives are equally as important. The frequency, the different modalities that you've described, the opportunity for, I call them the marinators. The people who get the information and they got to marinate on it for a minute, then then it
Uh,
clicks and they're ready to move on. But,
uh,
everyone has a different pace and a different receivership
right.
that they want.
Receivership. That's a great word, receivership. I'm going to
Yeah,
use that one.
that.
Yeah.
But and then you also said, transparency. I mean, I think, particularly when you have to give tough news
Yeah.
and difficult news, being transparent and finding that balance between panic and urgency and willingness to change. That's kind of a tightrope that we walk as CEOs, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Cheryl, you said something so important because one of the things it is to say, and our financial team has said this a lot, we're not in a panic situation. However, we have got to be proactive. If we look at the data, we look at the trends, we can't sit idle, and hope is not a strategy here. We will maintain hope, but we got to move. And so I think you know maintaining your sense of balance. And again, I keep saying you got to check yourself because we're part of this too. Nobody wants to see their employee base unduly, you know, affected. And that's my goal is to how do we sustain this and keep this? It may not be what it was, but we're all here and we're moving forward. One thing I do want to add, and I'm really proud of this, our financial team, I believe our deputy came up with the idea. Well, one, we launched our internal university to start training people on consistency and change in matters like this. So that was the idea of one of our senior team members, Alicia Collins, came up with that, and it's working out beautifully. But one of the things that our deputy came up with is after each board meeting, he hosts a seminar on the board's financial position, and it's open to anybody. And he walks them through the financials. Where are we? Where we are year to date, month performance, all of those things. And I think that's great. One, it helps elevate the knowledge base of all of our leaders because keeping it to the senior staff, I need them to see and understand that you have a part in this. What your store does or doesn't do, those supplies, every bag literally counts. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed watching evolve.
Yeah, and I think you've taken me down one other question I wanted to explore with you, and that was kind of this: how do you decide the pace of
Yeah,
change? And your example of giving financials to everyone and anyone who wants to come in, right? There may be more appetite from some. There may be others who just
yeah,
have different levels of education of what that means. You've
yeah.
nicely tied that back to the why, right? So you've
Mhm.
given them that. Have you ever had the experience where you've either pushed the change too far, too fast, and people didn't keep up with understanding it, or did it fail? And
Yeah.
what did you learn to adapt from that?
Well, I'm going to own from way back in college fraternity days, and I'm one of those guys who I'm always looking at the mark ahead and kind of left the rest of my folks behind me, to which they were not very happy. And that's been a metaphor for life, really. So I'm always the one that tends to run a bit ahead. What I've learned about myself, and I'll point the finger at me, I have to slow down a bit, remember to look back and ask, okay, how you guys doing back there? You with me? Okay, I'm going to go left. And then for me, the pace, listening to those around you, not just your C-suite, as broad as you can, the whole organization. Not to say that we slow the pace, but maybe everything isn't an urgent matter today. Maybe it's 2 weeks or a month from now, or maybe we approach it another way. So I think being open to that. Um, but again, I go back to, we're in the seat. There's no crystal ball. We can see, sense, hear things that maybe they can't, and it's our responsibility to them, to the organization, to our boards, to be proactive. There's some things we've been exploring with robotics, and out of the need to change the way work is done and less of a labor intensive place. It hasn't completely yielded the way I want it to yield, but I'm convinced in order for us to keep up with the work demands, we've got to simplify our work. It cannot be just the way we did it 77 years ago. And so some would say that might be a less than successful example, but I'm convinced as I sit in the seat and try to see into the future, and we need that now simply because labor, we know, is our biggest cost. And so we've got to manage that and think about new ways of doing it. But then you own it, and you, like the proverbial duck on the water, okay, left.
Yep. Well, and I think how astute of you to recognize it. When I think about the folks in the CEO seat, people think, "Oh, you got it made sitting over there," and it's like, no, you're carrying the weight of an entire organization on your shoulders.
Yeah.
You're oftentimes, carrying the weight of an industry, in many ways, because a lot of CEOs are thought leaders within their industries.
Yeah.
And the organizations and the industries rely on you and us to continue charting that course forward. And so I love the example that you learned from way back in your fraternity days to say, keep pace with me here, because I'm not doing this for the sake of change. I'm doing this to keep us all employed and keep the organization and the industry moving forward, and giving folks a minute to understand the why behind that, I think is fantastic. Keva, we're nearing into the end of this. I could talk to you all day long. I could. This is fantastic. We might invite you back to do another one of these.
I welcome it.
Good. If there's anything, last kind of words of wisdom that you could give us around kind of managing through the change fatigue process, keeping your eye on the ball, the future, where you want to go, bringing your people back, letting them know, turn left, turn right, whatever it is. What are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah. A few things I always say to my team. A part of our value system is I call the big four. And I always tell people, particularly younger people, if you did nothing else in your career but these four things, you would be head and shoulders above. Over communicate, listen, follow up, and follow through. And so, I try to practice that myself. I mean, we're all human. We all fall short. But if you did those four things, the loop that wasn't closed, the decision we made, who picked that up? Did I really hear what you were saying and not saying? And so I think those are biggies. And then, control what you can control, because there's so much now that is just out of our sphere of control. It just is sobering. And so let's get focused on what we can do. And we're in the middle of a 3-year strategic plan, and that's going to be our roadmap. And it's meant to be organic and evolutionary. It's not a static document. It will be a living document. We finished a 3-year, and so we're on to the next. And the last thing I remember, I started my career with the city of Charlotte, and one of my biggest mentors was Deputy City Manager Pam Seifert, and I just did and still think the world of Pam. And I remember her; she always had sage advice. But one of the things she said: have some parties, celebrate your wins. And I'm the worst at that. Like I said, I'm always looking at, and even if it's just small things. I mean, and rely on your people. I have a great team end to end. They're smart. They know the industry. Trust them. Trust them.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. I think I'm going to steal your four things that you described, because I think it sums up, our conversation around change fatigue. And we know you can't communicate enough, so you're
Yep.
number one to over communicate. We need to listen and understand where our people are to help them navigate through that. I love that. Following up and following through. Keva, I'm going to steal those. So thanks for the words of wisdom. And then, of course, we're going to celebrate all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keva Walton, CEO of Mecklenburg ABC Board. Always a joy to have a conversation with you. Look forward to many more. Thanks for being our guest today on Workforce Rewired.
My pleasure, my great friend Cheryl. You're doing a great job over there at Catapult. And again, we're honored and privileged to be a member.
Thank you.